Hello everyone, Jeff with the Green Review here. Plants don't feel wind chill the way objects that are trying to stay warm at specific temperatures do. Plant tissue temperatures drop with the drop in the air and soil temperature around them. Winter's dry winds and low humidity can damage plant tissue more than the cold. If air and soil temperatures are too cold for the plant, tissue can be damaged and the plant is in the slow death range. The longer the temperatures stay cold in the slow death range, the more damage that is done. The damage is progressive in that the colder it is, the more damage that is done, and the faster it occurs because the plant moves into the quick death range. Different parts of a plant often exhibit different cold hardiness abilities. Very often, flower buds are the least cold hardy parts of a plant. Their quick death range starts at a higher temperature. A flowering shrub losing its flowers may not be too big of a deal because it'll flower again next year. But when an apple or a peach tree loses its flowers during the winter, there'll be no fruit, and so you have to go an entire year without any fruit. So that's a bigger deal when you're dealing with flower bud loss during the winter. Different varieties of species can have different tolerances to cold, so find a variety that will survive in your area. A blanket of snow can protect the lower parts of a shrub and the whole perennial that is in the ground. It helps to protect the tree and shrub roots that are often less hardy than the top of a tree that is always exposed to colder temperatures. Plant roots in above-ground containers often need to be insulated to protect the roots from drying out and from dying from the even average cold winters. The pots can be buried in the ground for the winter or grouped together and mulch applied to cover the whole group of pots. For around a century, gardeners have looked to hardiness zone maps for inspiration on decisions of which plants were suitable for their landscapes. The maps are published in many books and garden catalogs. There have been cold hardiness zone maps since Alfred Reder published one in 1927. In 1960, 65, and 1990, the USDA produced maps. In January of 2012, the United States Department of Agriculture, the USDA, released the newest plant hardiness zone map for the United States. Each map update used more recent temperature data rather than adding to the existing data to create a longer-term map. The 1990 USDA map looked at 14,500 locations, but only used 8,000 weather stations that had valid data, which was twice as many as the previous maps. That 1990 USDA map used the average minimum temperature for only 13 years between 1974 and 1986. The 1990 map showed much of the country as being a zone or more colder than the previous 1965 USDA map. The 1965 map used data from a short, warmer period of years, and the 1990 map used data from a short, colder range of years. The Arbor Day Foundation released a new map in 2006 using data from only 5,000 stations during the previous 15 years, which were back to being warmer. So their short-term map once again looks a lot like the 1965 USDA map. Since we have weather data from many more weather stations and longer time periods, it makes no sense to create a map from such limited data. The newest 2012 USDA map again looks at 8,000 stations over a 30-year period from 1976 to 2005, and it looks a lot like the 1965 USDA map. Average weather is made up of highs and lows. Taking a small sampling of data can taint the data to one end or the other. If we did maps of only one day or 1 year at a time, sometimes we'd have very warm maps and sometimes very cold ones. It doesn't make sense. The USDA website notes climate changes are usually based on trends in overall average temperatures recorded over 50 to 100 years. Because the new 2012 map represents 30-year averages that are essentially extreme weather events, the coldest temperature of the year, changes in map zones are not reliable evidence of whether there has been global warming. A plant may be injured by cold temperature in the fall before it goes dormant, and this spring when a cold snap comes after a plant has already begun growing again. Neither of these situations is covered by cold hardiness zone maps. All of the cold hardiness zone maps use the average annual minimum temperature, which is not the same as the coldest minimum temperature that occurred each year during that time. For example, a zone that averages minus 10 degrees may have had several winters during which the temperature dropped to minus 21 or minus 27, and several years where the coldest temperature only went to something like a warmer minus 4. Together, all over 30 years of record cold and record not so cold temperatures, the average is minus 10. Planting trees that you want to live more than a few years will require looking at more information than the average-based hardiness zone map. Even though Seattle, Dallas, and Tallahassee are in the same 8B cold hardiness zone, they have very different climates when you consider all the other weather factors. So what does all this mean to me? Many gardeners want to grow plants that they're not really capable of growing in their landscape for a variety of reasons. For the desired plant, their landscape may be too wet or dry, too sunny or shady, or may be located in a region that gets too warm in the summer or too cold in the winter. Unfortunately, there are no plant-to-environment balance maps telling gardeners if they live in an area that is too wet, dry, sunny, and shady, or any other information except average cold and average heat. The heat zone maps that have been produced in the past are even less reliable than the cold hardiness maps and are only useful in a general way. Another what's this mean to me? Garden center owners know what survives in their area. They will not look at USDA hardiness zone maps and say, oh look, we can grow all kinds of new plants because a map tells us what will grow here. To do so would be the same as the Mark Twain quote after spending the night camping. He said, "It's a good thing the thermometer wasn't an inch longer. We would have all frozen to death." How should a hardiness zone map be used? Gardeners need to keep in mind that all the cold hardiness zone maps only account for one factor in a plant's environmental needs for thriving and surviving. All of the following factors can influence a plant's survival: heat, streetlights versus day length, soil and airborne toxins, acid rain, fertilizer, watering, pest control, location, like a yard versus a sidewalk planter box, microclimate, spring and fall frost, soil pH, soil aeration, and many others. Every individual landscape has small microclimate differences. The flower beds in the sunshine on a south-facing brick wall may be a cold hardiness zone or two warmer than the flower beds in the shady north side of the same building because they never get as cold. If you want to plant long lifespan trees, shrubs, and even some perennials such as peonies, then consider that the cold hardiness map is only recording average lows and not extreme lows. You may want to get plants hardy to at least one zone colder than the map or plant catalog says, just so it can survive the record cold winter temperatures that come every winter. So cold hardiness maps are useful to a certain extent, but they really need to be taken with a little grain of salt because they don't always work very well for every landscape and every gardener. And so be careful when you're seeing them in the catalogs to make sure that you know in advance what you're getting. And this is Jeff with a Green Review. Thanks for watching.